There is a voice inside your head. It tells you what you should want, who you should be, what's admirable, and what is shameful. It comments when you fail. It cheers when you conform. It warns you not to go too far. And for most of your life, you've believed it was you. But what if it isn't? What if the voice that narrates your existence, the one you've trusted as your most private companion, is not the voice of your soul, but an echo? An echo of every command you've ever heard, every glance of disapproval, every moral parable delivered in a child's tone, every headline, sermon, advertisement, exam grade, parental sigh, and playground insult, all layered on top of each other like dust on a statue until you forgot what the statue ever looked like. We like to think we were born into a self, that we grew up and became who we were meant to be. But what if that's a myth? What if you didn't become who you are? You just learned how to survive. From the earliest moments of life, a child senses what earns love and what invites punishment. You smiled when they smiled at you. You cried. When they turned away, you noticed what made them clap, what made them cold. And slowly, so slowly you didn't even know it was happening. You built a self that would be rewarded. You mimicked. You complied. You were impressed. You adapted. You became what they needed. Because being real was too dangerous. Psychologist Gabor describes this as the tragic trade-off. Authenticity versus attachment. When a child must choose between being themselves or being accepted, they will abandon themselves every time, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. The body always chooses survival, and so begins the great forgetting. You forget the urges you buried, the instincts you silenced, the questions you were told not to ask. And in their place, you build what Carl Jung called the persona, the mask worn not to deceive others, but to be allowed near them. Eventually, the mask hardens. It becomes your face, and the voice you mistook for your own becomes the only one you recognize, but every now and then, there are cracks, a dream that disturbs you, a longing you can't explain, a feeling, deep down, that this life, your life, is somehow too small for you. Nietzsche warned of the herd morality, that most people never think their own thoughts, never desire their own desires, never question who taught them to obey. They borrow their values from the crowd, believing safety is the truth. But is it? Because if your beliefs were handed to you, are they yours? If your dreams were scripted by a culture that profits from your ambition, do they mean anything? If your idea of success only exists in someone else's language, then what exactly are you chasing? Imagine a child sitting in an empty theater. The curtains rise. On stage, a life unfolds, their own. The same scenes, the same victories, the same betrayals. They mouth the words, but they never wrote the script. Applause echoes from invisible seats. But no one's really watching. No one's really there. This is the modern tragedy. A life that looks full, but feels hollow. A voice that's loud, but borrowed. And when the applause fades, and the performance ends, and the curtain falls, what remains? Just you. The one who watched it all. But who is that? You see, the terrifying possibility is not that we're lost. It's that we've never met ourselves. That beneath the choreography, beneath the narration, beneath the endless approval-seeking, is a silence we've never dared to enter, a silence that holds the truth that you did not choose your identity, you inherited it, you rehearsed it, you performed it, because at some point you learned that being real was too risky, and being accepted was safer than being seen. But if that voice was borrowed, who were you before the world taught you your name? There is a kind of forgetting. That doesn't feel like loss. It feels like progress, like obedience, like success. It begins small. A rule here, a correction there. Sit still. Don't ask that. Say thank you. Say sorry. Be good. And good, of course, means quiet, predictable, digestible, not dangerous. Not different as you grow, the instructions. Get more sophisticated, but the message stays the same. Leave parts of yourself behind and we will reward you. Society does not need to imprison you to make you submit. It only needs to offer you something sweeter than truth, safety, status, acceptance, purpose. That's all it takes to make you forget. They don't kill the real you. They make you bury it and then hand you a certificate for doing so. In school, you're told that success means performance, not presence. Memorize, replicate, obey. Don't think too strangely. Don't feel too deeply. And if you do, don't show a dot in religion. You're handed virtue, but only in exchange for guilt. Your instincts are condemned, your questions dismissed, and your silence exalted as holiness. In the economy, you are given a role, consumer, worker, brand. You're told to chase productivity, to monetize your existence, to become your resume. Don't realize what's happening, because you're too busy being praised for it. Every mask they offer you comes with a round of applause. Every name they assign you sounds noble: model student, team player, reliable adult, ambitious entrepreneur. Every label is a cage made of gold. You begin to believe that the further you drift from your truth, the closer you are to becoming somebody. But in becoming somebody, you erase who you were before the world gave you a name. This is not new. In Greek mythology, souls entering the afterlife drank from the river Lethe to forget their past. Only then could they be reincarnated into the world again. Only then could they play the part. Modern life is no different. The moment you step into society, you are offered your own Lethe. It comes in many forms: social media, job titles, ideologies, curated identities. You drink, and with each sip, you forget. And with each sip, they clap. Foucault called this internalized discipline. No guards, no threats. Just you, performing the role so convincingly that the prison becomes invisible. You become both prisoner and warden, keeping yourself in line, not with force, but with a constant fear of losing approval. Hannah Arendt, observing the atrocities of the 20th century, warned us, evil is not always violent. Sometimes it is banal, routine, paperwork, promotion, following orders, fitting in, doing your job, even when that job slowly erodes your soul. You didn't rebel because you didn't notice the trade. It was too subtle, too polite. They gave you comfort, entertainment, followers, dreams, a future. All they asked in return was that you forget what mattered, that you forget who you were, and that you never, under any circumstances, wake up, because to wake up is to remember. To remember that the life they gave you is not the same as the life that is yours. But even after the applause, the promotions, the polished image, something doesn't feel right. There is silence in the background, a phantom hunger, a restlessness you can't name because you followed the script perfectly. You earned your place. You wore every mask they handed you. But now, standing in the kingdom that paid you to forget, why does it still feel hollow? There is a fear more ancient than death, a fear more primal than pain. It is the fear of vanishing, without a trace, of being erased, not from history, but from meaning. This isn't the fear of the body dying. It's the fear of you dying, not as flesh, but as identity, because beneath all the striving, all the noise, all the performance, there is a quiet terror. What if none of this matters? What if I disappear, and the world forgets I was ever here? We rarely say this out loud, Instead, we chase immortality in socially acceptable forms: legacy, reputation, creativity, power. We want to be remembered. We want to leave something behind. Not because we're selfish, but because we're scared. Scared of becoming no one. Of never having existed beyond this fragile, temporary name. Ernest Becker called this the denial of death, the psychological strategy by which humans repress the reality of mortality through symbolic immortality. If the body must die, then let the image survive, the brand, the story, the achievement. The myth. This is how empires are built, how art is made, how religions are born. Not always from love, but from terror. And yet, the deeper the fear, the harder we cling to the self. We sculpt our identities like fortresses. We defend our opinions like they are our flesh. We wear our trauma like armor. We resist change, not because it's painful, but because it threatens to dissolve the only thing that makes us feel real. Even suffering becomes sacred if it preserves the sense of I. This fear of ego death is so potent that entire industries exist to keep us distracted from it. Advertising sells more than products. It sells continuity. Social media offers more than attention. It offers proof that we exist. Culture gives U.S. roles to play: artist, rebel, leader, victim, not to free us, but to keep us believing we are somebody. But here's the paradox. The more we try to preserve the self, the less alive we become. Life in its rawest form cannot be contained within a fixed identity. It moves, it destroys, it renews. It strips you of certainty and demands that you shed the skin of who you were over and over again. The ego resists this. It wants stillness, not peace but preservation. It says, don't change, don't question, don't let go. And so we live frozen, rehearsing the same patterns, telling the same stories, defending the same mask, but every so often something cracks. A loss, a crisis, a dream. Something shatters the illusion. And for a brief moment, we glimpse the void, the terrifying possibility that there is no fixed self, just awareness, just presence. Buddhist philosophy does not see this as death, but as liberation. The self, they say, is like a flame. It flickers, it moves, it is not solid. To cling to it is to suffer. To release it is to awaken, but awakening feels like dying. Until it doesn't, because the ego whispers, if you let go of who you are, you'll become nothing. But the truth is stranger. When you finally let go, you don't become nothing. You become everything. You become the one who sees, not just the one who is seen. You become silence instead of noise, space instead of shape. You become not a story, but the awareness in which stories rise and fall. And yet, standing at that edge, between the self you've always defended and the mystery of what lies beyond, there is terror. Because to take that step is to lose the very thing you've spent your entire life building. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the only way to live fully is to die first. Not the death of the body, but the death of the illusion. The death of the mask. The death of the voice that told you who to be. Because just beyond that death, beyond the fear, beyond the silence, something else is waiting. Something deeper. Something that cannot be controlled, or named, or possessed. Only entered. Comes a moment in every story of transformation where the old self must die. Not metaphorically, not figuratively, but ritually. For thousands of years, across cultures and continents, this truth was understood. Before you can awaken, you must first be undone. Before you find what's real, you must sacrifice what is false. And the ego, clever, armored, well-rehearsed, is. The first offering, ancient initiations, were never meant to entertain. They were meant to terrify. The boy becomes a man only after walking through the jungle alone, hearing voices in the dark that speak in riddles and blood. The girl becomes a woman only after her body turns into a mystery, bleeding with symbols she does not yet understand. The shaman becomes a healer only after losing his mind to the spirits, tearing through the veil that separates identity from essence. In each case, something dies. Today we have therapies, retreats, drugs, and meditations. But the principle is the same. You go inward not to polish the self, but to dissolve it. Fasting, silence, darkness, hallucinogens. These aren't tools for relaxation. They are weapons pointed at the ego. They remove your distractions. They amplify your fear. They force you to face the one thing you've been avoiding all your life, yourself. Jung called this confrontation the meeting with the shadow, the part of you that holds everything you denied, the rage, the envy, the wounds, the shame. The real you, buried beneath years of pretending. To kill the self is to descend into that underworld, not as an explorer, but as a sacrifice. The Sumerian myth of Inanna tells the story well. The goddess queen of heaven descends into the underworld to meet her sister, the goddess of death. But she cannot enter in royal form. At each gate, she is stripped of her crown, her jewels, her robes, her power. By the time she reaches the final chamber, she is naked, vulnerable, unmade. And then she dies. This is the ritual. A slow unmasking, a surrender. You peel away the names, the status, the defense mechanisms, the lies, until you are raw, silent, unknown. Even to yourself. It is a sacred horror, because what you face in that place is not symbolic. It is you. Not the you the world applauds, but the one who never got to speak. You meet the truth you tried to forget, the guilt you swallowed, the choices you can't undo, the rage you denied because it wasn't polite, the dreams you abandoned because they weren't practical. The ritual doesn't care about your plans. It breaks them. And if you're lucky, if you stay, it also frees you, because once the illusion dies, there is nothing left to defend. No image to maintain, no story to uphold, no identity to protect. There is only silence, but not the silence of emptiness, the silence of possibility, a kind of vastness. Spacious, formless, alive. What dies is not your soul. What dies is your attachment to the version of you that was never real to begin with. And in that death, in that sacred unraveling, something strange happens. You are not destroyed. You are revealed. You begin to sense that beneath the ego, beneath the fear, beneath the story, something has been waiting, not a better version of you, something else entirely. And now, as the dust settles and the old skin falls away, a new question rises from the silence. If I am no longer who I thought I was, what remains? After the fire, there is silence. After the death of the image, the collapse of the mask, the surrender of the role. Something stirs in the ashes. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't introduce itself. It has no name, no title, no opinion. But it's always been there. It was there before the identity, before the applause, before the wounds, before the fear, before the dream of who you were supposed to become. It was there when you were a child, staring at the world with no words, just presence. It was there in moments when time stopped, when you forgot yourself in awe, in grief, in wonder, in love. And now, stripped of the performance, without anything left to protect, you notice it again, not as a thought, but as a witness. Voice that was always there, not the voice in your head, the one that narrates, analyzes, judges. That voice is the mask's final whisper. It belongs to the character. This voice doesn't speak. It seems, it hears, it feels, but it doesn't comment. It simply is. Eastern traditions call it awareness. the self beyond the self. In Advaita Vedanta, it is described as formless, eternal, untouched by thought or identity. Not something you create, but something you return to. Meister Eckhart called it the ground of the soul, the place where God speaks, not in language, but in stillness. Not to you, but to you. And Eckhart Tolle, echoing these truths, writes that we are not the thoughts we think, we are the space in which they arise. This is not mystical poetry. It's a shift in perception, a turning inward, not toward content, but toward consciousness itself. You are not your name. That was given to you. You are not your story. That was constructed. You are not your scars. Those are the echoes of battles long ended. You are the one who sees the name come and go. Who watches the story unfold. Who feels the scars without being defined by them. You are the awareness behind it all. And yet, this realization does not arrive with fireworks. It is quiet. Almost disappointingly simple, because awareness doesn't do anything. It doesn't win arguments. It doesn't build empires. It doesn't chase goals. It just exists. But that is its power, because the world only has power over you when you forget who you are. When you believe you are the voice that needs defending, the persona that needs improving, the history that needs justifying. When you remember yourself as aware, the game loses its grip. You stop needing to be someone. You stop needing to prove anything. You no longer search for meaning in titles, praise, or performance. Instead, you begin to notice the texture of the moment, the depth of silence, the space between thoughts. And in that noticing, something sacred reappears, not purpose. Not power. Peace. Not the peace of answers, but the peace of not needing them. You don't become perfect. You don't become enlightened. You simply stop running. You stop searching for yourself in places where you never were. You return home. And all the personas you built, the achiever, the rebel, the victim, the warrior, they begin to dissolve. Not in anger, but like mist in morning light. They were never enemies. They were costumes. And now they fall away. For the first time, you sit in the center of your being without pretending. No name. No role. No narrative. Just presence. The horror has passed. What remains is stillness, and stillness is not the end. It is the doorway. Because now a question begins to bloom not in fear, but in possibility. If I am no longer performing, if I don't need to be someone the world approves of, if I don't have to protect a name, a mask, a story, then what does life look like when lived freely? What does it feel like to act from this place? What becomes possible when nothing needs to be proven? There is a kind of person the world does not understand. They don't chase what others chase. They don't argue where others argue. They don't speak the language of ambition, of performance, of belonging. To the world. They seem lost, but they aren't. They are free. This is the life that begins after the self dies, after the mask is burned, after the applause fades, after the need to be someone dissolves into dust. It is not the life of the hero, or the leader, or the successful one. It is the life of the outsider, the fool, the mystic, the madman who walks freely, barefoot through the empire, laughing at its rules. To those still inside the game, he looks broken, irreverent, dangerous. But to himself, he is more whole than ever. Diogenes, the ancient Greek philosopher, lived in a barrel. He rejected wealth, status, and manners. When Alexander the Great offered him anything in the world, Diogenes replied, "Yes, move, you're blocking my sunlight." He had no fear, no desire for power, no addiction to approval, because he had nothing to protect, no ego to defend, no image to maintain. In his poverty, he was richer than kings. Rumi, The great Sufi poet once wrote, "You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life?" His madness wasn't chaos, it was divine intoxication. He danced not because he needed to be seen, but because he had already disappeared into the beloved. The Zen masters were the same. They shattered logic with laughter, answered questions with silence, struck their students or burned scriptures, not out of cruelty, but to snap them out of their trance. To remind them, the truth is not in words. It is in the space between them. These figures never fit neatly into history books, because they are not products of their time. They are ruptures in it. They are not role models. They are wildfires. They live without a mask not because they want to be different, but because they no longer see any reason to pretend. And here lies the paradox. Once you stop performing, once you no longer care what the world thinks of you, you begin to see the world for what it truly is. You see the fear behind the success, the insecurity behind the pride, the loneliness behind the smiles. You see the costumes, the theater, the invisible walls, and you realize that almost everyone is acting because they're terrified to stop. But you're not, because once you've tasted the silence beneath your name, the game can no longer seduce you. You walk through the crowd, no longer searching for permission. You speak without fear of being misunderstood. You love without needing to be loved back. You are no longer a character in the story. You are the space in which the story unfolds. And yes, you will be misunderstood. They may call you crazy, arrogant, or lost. But you know something they don't. You know what it costs to belong. You know what it takes to be free. You have nothing to prove, nothing to gain, nothing to defend. And in that nothing, there is everything. Now, the question is no longer about awakening. The question is what comes after. What happens when you stop playing along? What happens when you step outside the illusion, not to destroy it, not to preach against it, but simply to stop believing it? You become a mirror, a question, a reminder. To the world, you are a madman, but to yourself, you are finally awake. So here we are, after the unmasking, the death, the silence, after the rituals and the shadows and the letting go, after the laughter of the madman and the stillness of the one who watches. What remains? Only this: there was never a gate. Only the illusion of one. All this time, we believed there was something to pass through, a threshold between us and truth, between us and peace, between us and eternity. And like devoted pilgrims, we tried everything to reach it. We obeyed, performed, conformed. We rebelled, questioned, and awakened. We played every role: sinner, seeker, savior, hoping one would earn us entry. But eternity is not a prize. It cannot be won. It cannot be unlocked. It cannot be earned by virtue, talent, effort, or pain. Because it was never closed, the only gate was the self, the idea that you are separate, that you must become something, that you must be worthy, that you must improve, strive, suffer, transcend. All of it, an elaborate story told by the ego to justify its own survival. In mystic traditions, this is the final paradox, the one too simple to understand and too vast to believe. You are already what you are looking for, not as a concept, not as a belief, but as a direct, wordless reality underneath all trying, all naming, all becoming. The Sufi mystic Al-Halai whispered, "I am the truth," and was executed for it, not because he claimed divinity, but because he dared to say what the gatekeepers never want you to realize: there is nothing between you and the infinite, Zen. Teachings speak of the gateless gate, a path that can only be walked by those who stop trying to walk it, a door that disappears the moment you no longer need it. The post-structuralists, too, dismantle the illusion of fixed identity. Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, They warned us. We are not static selves, but shifting patterns of language, power, and time. There is no you to be liberated. There is only the awareness that liberation was always already true. This is not an argument against reality. It is an invitation to see reality without the veil, because what dies when the self dies is not your life. It's the story about your life, the story that said you were lacking, the story that made you chase, the story that made you afraid to disappear. But when the story ends, when the character dissolves, when the gate you feared your whole life turns out to be made of smoke, you don't vanish. You exhale, and the exhale doesn't take you somewhere else. It brings you right here, to the present, not the present as a moment between past and future, but as the only reality that has ever existed. Eternity is not endless time. It is the absence of time. It is now, seen without the lens of becoming. You do not need to hold on to it. You cannot. It holds you. You were never separate from it. You were simply distracted by the mirror, the voice, the name, the masks. You mistook the performance for the performer. You mistook the gate for the truth, but the moment you stop looking for something more, the moment you stop trying to be something else, the moment you surrender the search itself, the gate swings open and disappears. And you find yourself standing where you've always been. Whole. Still. Free. Not enlightened, not superior. Just a present, utterly, silently present, not to escape life, but to finally enter it, not to conquer eternity, but to realize you were never outside it. There is no gate. There is only one now. There is only awareness. There is only this unnameable, ungraspable, alive. You don't need to understand it. You only need to remember. You are it, and you always were.